as long as Swami was with us, we could go around and tell stories, share experiences. But now that he has withdrawn, I would say now comes the hard part for all of us, which is to pay attention to what he's told us all along and make an effort to live his message. I will introduce the topic shortly, but I would like to make a few general remarks. My talk, which by the way, hold on to your chairs in case you fall down, will be in 4 parts. That means I'm going to be here with you today, this afternoon, tomorrow, and day after tomorrow. And before you throw me out, I'll get out to Canada, where you can't chase me. No, I'm not joking. I'm trying to be beyond your reach. But while I'm here, I really want to draw attention to something that Swami has said in many discourses and link them up. In fact, he has linked them up in many of his discourses. And the central point is that though we see a lot of differentiation in this universe, we see people, we see flowers, chairs, mics, and all these, they all look different to us. There is a central connectivity. And this connectivity is very profound. It goes through many levels. And my attention would be to draw my objective would be to draw your attention to this universal entanglement or connectivity. And because of that, my talk would be spanning many areas. To some extent, it will be looking like a broad sweep. And to some extent, it will look like a roller coaster, because at times I'll be talking about science, at times I'll be talking about sociology. You may start wondering, what is this guy doing here? This is supposed to be a spiritual retreat. And just to assure you, when your confidence is coming down, I'll talk about spirituality. And when you feel good, I'll shatter it by saying, now you've got hard work to do. Now comes the hard part. What I'm trying to say is, please hang on there, and it'll all make sense in due course. But at the end of it all, you will find that my talk is all about what Swami said about many things and how it relates to what we should be doing now that he has left us. So let's get started. They have already put on the first slide. It was supposed to come now, but anyway, it's this. I've given this fancy title in order to attract the crowd, because Mike Congleton showed my book, and I'm now here promoting my book. Okay, but more seriously speaking, my topic is to show that if you look at the universe, there are 4 aspects. First is Vyashti, the individuals. We are all here. We are individual. However, together, we are not individuals. We are a coherent whole, at least we should be, which is society or samashti. This society is a part of nature. We all live on planet Earth. Planet Earth is part of solar system. Solar system is part of Milky Way. Milky Way is part of a whole set of local galaxies, and so on. So, I, the individual, am really a part of nature, which encompasses the whole of creation. And nature is a part of God. Swami put it very nicely. He said, see, these are fingers. Fingers is a part of the palm. Palm is a part of the arm. Arm is a part of this hand is a part of the full arm. Full arm is part of the body. So, there is a hierarchy, and we are at one end. Nevertheless, this finger is connected to the whole body. We don't realize that. And all our problems start from there. Why is it that we don't realize that? The next slide tells you why we don't understand that. Can I have the next slide, please? Oh, no, that is jump. Okay, all right. This shows why we don't realize. It's a bit dim here because of all this lighting, but here you see people, all of them are walking around with their cell phones. So that's thank you. All of them are walking with their cell phones, and that's what's happening. By the way, this is happening even in Prashanti. Only thing is there, people drive motorcycles listening to the cell phone like this. So if you come to Prashanti, be very careful about motorcycle drivers who drive. I'm not joking, they do this. They may not see you. When I walk, we get a lot of Sevadals now, young boys, they are all with this. And you have to make sure you don't bump into them because they won't look at you. So I have to avoid. This is what has happened to us. We are all very, very busy. Now, the next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? Yes. The connectivity I'm talking about is paraphrased in this slide. This is the individual who is a part of society, who is a part of nature, which is a part of God. Vyashti, Samashti, Srishti, Paramishti. This is Vyashti, so building block. Samashti, brick. This is what you may call the structure, room, house, or whatever it is. This is beyond the cosmos, the source of it all. We have a link, and we must understand the link this way. Otherwise, we are going to screw up everything for everybody, including us. Okay. Now, we are all conscious of our body, very conscious of our body. We do makeup, we get facelift, all sorts of things. Okay? This attachment that we have for the body, do you know what it is made up of? At the end of the day, it's made up of atoms. And you know what atom is? You'd be very surprised. Atom is emptiness. You may say, come on, you must be kidding. Well, let me give you the picture of the atom as a scientist would have it. Next slide, please. This shows a schematic of an atom. The size of the atom is 10 to the minus 8 centimeters. In physics, we use the word 1 angstrom because the man who first used this unit was a Swedish scientist named Armstrong. 10 to the minus 8 centimeters. That is 1 part in something like 100 million centimeters. At the center of this atom is the nucleus, which is 1 trillionth of a centimeter. 1 trillionth of a centimeter. 1 centimeter is about this much. Okay, 2.5 centimeters makes 1 inch in America. Now, the atom is 10 to the minus 8. This is 10 to the minus 12. It's very small compared to this. And around this atom are electrons, and they are about 10,000 times smaller than the nucleus. And if you take uranium nucleus, a uranium atom, that is the heaviest element found in nature, uranium, you will have 92 electrons there, and a tiny nucleus, which is about 10 to the minus 11 centimeters, and the whole thing is about 10 to the minus 7 centimeters, but all of it is empty, really speaking. And it is amazing that you put a lot of emptiness together, you get you and me, elephants, Sai Gita, and all these things, flowers, trees, mountains. But if you look at the amount of matter, it's very small. If you take all the matter, physical matter, in a human body and pack it, it'll be much smaller than an ice cube. And here we are, nothing but emptiness, feeling so proud of ourselves all the time. I don't know about what. That's because we don't really understand things properly. We are easily fooled. This should not happen. Okay. Now, where did these atoms come from? The next slide gives the picture. Next slide, please. Next slide. We have jumped a lot. I don't know. Yes. This is the next slide. This is the picture of science. You know, California is very famous for science. You have so many laboratories. The University of California has so many campuses, and all these campuses are chock full of Nobel laureates, and so on. And all these guys have told us, this, by the way, is the nucleus, size of the nucleus. they have found that our universe in which we live was born 13.86 billion years ago. I won't tell you how they discovered this. A lot of these experiments were done using the satellites that were designed and launched with the help of Jet Propulsion Lab here, right in the city, which I happened to visit yesterday. I was privileged to visit yesterday. And we now know this universe was born, our universe was born 13.86 years ago in an event referred to as Big Bang. And all this stuff that I am showing happened within a second. Within a second, the four basic forces manifested. And these are the four basic forces that govern all the laws of nature. Gravity, which operates everywhere in the universe. Strong forces, which operate inside the nucleus. Weak and electromagnetic forces. Weak forces are responsible for radioactivity. Electromagnetic forces are responsible for chemical binding at one end, and all the sound system at the other end. Your television, your cell phone, everything is done by electromagnetic. These are the four forces of inert matter that are present in the nature. Now, the reason I am mentioning all this is, in every nucleus in our body, the secret of the universe is encoded. We don't realize. When we walk around, we are walking around with the entire secret of the universe inside us. And what these guys are doing, spending billions of dollars in CERN and Fermi Lab in Batavia and all that, is to take one nucleus and probe into it. And they spend billions of dollars to find out. All that secret is inside us. There is a reason why I'm mentioning it, and I will come to that later. In the beginning of the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks a question. And in answer to that, Krishna says, I am in you at 3 levels. Swami says, I am in you, with you, around you. Krishna takes just the I am in you part and explains it at 3 levels. We'll come to that later. So, all these mysteries are within us. And we dissociate ourselves from nature by spoiling nature. Is that our nature? That's the question. I want to put that thought into you right now. Okay. Let me now go to the next slide. Okay, there it is. I talked about Krishna and he appears. This is a photograph of the Bhagavad Gita sculpture in the mandir. And there you see Krishna talking to Arjuna. From where I am, it's a bit fuzzy. I hope you see it better there. But there's a lot of stray lighting. Apologies for that. Krishna says, I am in you as gross matter, as the atoms in your body. I am in you as the life force prana, the power of the mind also. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhuto, I am the power that digests your this thing. So I am in you. So Swami is in us at this level as the atom, power, and life force. And I am also in you as the resident of your heart, ever ready to help you as the voice of conscience. So he is at the gross level, the subtle level, and the causal level. There are 3 levels in which God is present in us. Although I showed you Vyashti, Samashti, Srishti, Parameshti, seems far away, that is the God who is omnipresent everywhere. But that same God is in us at all levels. And by the way, I want us to appreciate a few facts. Supposing you take a guy who is only 100 kilos, not much. You know how much matter was required to destroy Hiroshima? I don't think any of you can guess. Hiroshima was blasted with a uranium-235 bomb, and it took only 5 grams of that uranium-235 when you use Einstein's formula, E equals mc squared. That was the energy that blasted out an entire city. Imagine what a 100-kilo guy can do. And if you think of all the people here, including me, the explosive power in us is more than that of all the hydrogen bombs and atom bombs that are present today in the world with the various nuclear powers. Luckily, God has made us very safe. We cannot ever explode, even in anger, that way. At best, we can bump into each other like they do in NFL, and that will probably produce some concussion, that's all. And there are neurosurgeons here who can take care of that. You see one right in front of me. But I don't know what he charges and whether your insurance will take you to him. That's your problem. Okay, let's get serious and go to the next slide. See, I'm going to give you hardcore spirituality, hard stuff. So, hey, this guy is very impatient at the back. Maybe he doesn't like my talk, he wants me to end quickly. So, if you look at the human being, the human being is made up of three entities. Here's the body, this is the mind, and this is the soul. The body and the mind is symbolic of the senses also, incidentally. They combine together to make the small I, or the ego self. So this is the small I, or ego self, which fills us with body consciousness, or what Swami said, BEHAVIOUR. You know, I'm conscious of my body, and that means not physical body alone. I'm conscious of my stature. I'm conscious of my power. I'm conscious of my authority. I'm conscious of my wealth, and so on and so forth. That is the ego self, the lower I. But here, seated in the heart, is God, who is absolute. The real self is I. So there is a tussle really between this ego self and, so to say, the real self. The mind and the body pull us towards this side, whereas God in the conscience, he says, listen, you have to come towards me. You're going the wrong direction. He's like the GPS system, the car trying to pull you. So the mind-body combination defines our senses. The senses tend to drag the individual towards the attractions of the external world. The heart tries to pull the other way towards the inner world. Life thus becomes a tug of war. Going this way, that way. Now, let's look at the next slide, please. Okay. Life is meant to be a journey from the lower self to the higher self. This will be a running theme in my talk. What do we do? How do we go from here to here? Because, in fact, you may ask, why should we go from here to here? Whoever told you we should go from here to here? That is a question that is relevant. But this requirement that we go from here to here is contained in this prayer, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, from darkness to light. Because the ego self is shrouded in darkness, ajnana, ignorance, spiritual ignorance. We have ego because we are spiritually ignorant. If you are spiritually smart, you will kick off that ignorance, and then you will experience light. So we have to somewhere or the other put on a switch. And life must be a journey where you explore where the switch is and flick it on, so that you go from here to here, which is synonymous with God. Next slide, please. Okay. He's jumped to, I think. Why is it? Okay, it's the right slide. With regard to going from the lower ego self to the higher ego self, what is the road map? Arjuna asked Krishna, can you give me the road map? Do you have the Google GPS system? And Krishna says, sure. I'll give you two options. He says, you can adore me as God without form. That's option number one. Or you can worship me as God with form. Both ways, you will reach me. And you will be in bliss forever. But for you, Arjuna, the second option is better. This is the essence of the 12th chapter. In other words, you can worship God as the formless, or you can say God has got a form and worship that God with form in the proper manner according to prescriptions given, procedures prescribed. Both ways you will get bliss. For you, because you're a dummy, this is better. So the first book on spirituality for dummies was written by Krishna himself in the 12th chapter, long before you guys invented it here. Okay? And by the way, I am also a dummy, except that this dummy is telling the other dummies. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, this makes it serious. Now you will really appreciate this is spirituality 101 for dummies, not just 101. This is us. If you are a yogi, you can go like this, just through meditation. There have been yogis in California, but now they are replaced by movie stars. So what do movie stars do? All of us are from stars, you know. That's what they told me in JPL yesterday. You're all come from stardust, a star that exploded and became sun. I'll talk about it later on, just to show that I also know what they know in JPL. Okay. We engage in service and then reach God. Dr. Reddy, I'm doing a commercial for you. Now, very seriously, how does this equate to what Krishna said in terms of bhakti? Krishna talked about bhakti. You're talking about service. There's something mixed up here. But Swami has explained this. He says, I ask you to do a service in order to bring down your ego. Okay, what does bringing down your ego got to do with bhakti? You see, if you want to be devoted to me and you're attached to something else, you can't be really devoted to me. Make your choice, man. Bring down your ego. That is your best devotion. The best way to bring down your ego is to serve others. This word service must be understood properly. We think service means organizing something, taking food packets, giving here. In earthquake, okay, they need blankets, I give that. That's not service. That is the form of service. That is the appearance of service. Whom do you serve? You serve your master. You don't serve somebody else. You serve your master always. And for us, that master is God. So when I go and give a food packet or something to somebody, I don't look upon that guy as a poor guy, homeless guy, or something like that. I say he's God, but disguised in this form, like this gentleman, old man with this. And I serve him. Then, when I see God in that man, that becomes true service, that becomes a true expression of love, that becomes true devotion, and my ego will come down. So I get two things. My ego comes down, my devotion quality also improves. That is the beautiful Kali Yuga recipe Swami gave. I don't have to sit and do pujas, go and ask somebody for this and that. Swami used to describe this very nicely. A man will sit in the puja room and he'll be doing pujas. Somebody will ring the bell and he will tell, he will call his wife. In the old days, somebody is there, go and attend to him. His mind is not on puja. All the time he's being distracted. Here there is no distraction. I am focused on service. And that is why Swami always said, after the service, ask how much good it has done to you. Don't ask whether it did any good to that other guy. Ask how much good has it done to you as your ego come down, like the blood pressure and sugar, as it come down. But for this, there is a minimum. Here, the minimum is 0. Otherwise, it does not come down. So we must keep on trying. In other words, this is the path that is preferred for 99.99% of us, because we just can't go do these things. I know yogis have come here and meditated in this beautiful valley, and there are places here which I hope you will take me to, just to feel inspired. But at the end of the day, this is our job. And let me publicly say, even if it means an embarrassment to Dr. Reddy, he's doing a wonderful job in organizing this thing. And he is really bringing the spiritual perspective of service into what is being done. And by the way, this tradition was started by Swami himself. Back in the Pathamandiram days, he used to distribute food. He never called it poor feeding. From day one, he called it Narayana Seva. Meaning what? I am serving God. They were all poor people with hardly any clothes. I've got photographs of Narayana Seva of those days. Swami will come, I've got photographs of those days looking at the kitchen, seeing everything is ready. Take it very seriously. I am really serving God. Narayana himself is demonstrating to us how to serve God. You see pictures of him bending down, serving people in the ground when there used to be thorns and all that in the Hillview Stadium. He went there and did it. So he has really shown us, if you look at the fine print, an excellent way of serving God. Be it medical camp, be it something else, even Bal Vikas classes. That also is a kind of seva to God in human form. Now, this is an important aspect. Now, let us change gear. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, it has come. I'm going to technical spirituality because we have to relate all this to that. Otherwise, we won't understand the link between Vyashti, Samashti, Srishti, Paramashti. No, I have to always keep my eye on that. We live in the universe, which is made up of inert matter, glass, this, plastic, and so on. And according to science, we have only this. But nevertheless, even science has to acknowledge that in this universe made up of gross matter, most of the universe is gross matter because stars, all these things have no life. And you have billions and trillions of stars in the sky. Most of it is inert matter. But in the midst of all this inert matter, life exists. Science can recognize life, but science cannot explain what life is. Science knows how to deal with life. If you get sick, the doctor knows what to do. But it's all via analysis at what I would call the inert level. You'll see your blood pressure. Blood is treated as a liquid. Sugar is treated as a chemical. Breath is treated as air. But consciousness is there. You laugh, you smile, all those things science cannot explain. It is just beyond science, and there is a reason which we will come to there shortly. In fact, I will come to it right away. Life is an attribute that we have, which is subtle in nature. Science, which is done, by science I mean hardcore physics, chemistry, biology, is all bounded by space and time. The birth of the universe started with the birth of space and the evolution of time. Since then, universe is expanding, which means space is expanding and time is flowing, that's all. And in that, lots of things are happening. Atoms are created, stars are formed, and so on and so forth. But there is no space in this description for life. But life exists. So we must deal with it. Science is not able to deal with it. Spirituality says that is because science is subtle. Krishna says, I am God. I am the one who is digesting your food. I am the one who is circulating blood. In fact, Swami says, one of the names for God is Angirasa. Angam means limbs, organs. Rasa means juice. What is the meaning of Angirasa? Well, what is it that circulates throughout our body? Blood. And what does blood do? It delivers energy to every place, right? The brain needs a lot of energy. So how does it come? It comes via the blood. Blood is the mail carrier, Federal Express or US Postal Service that takes energy and delivers it there. So God's name is also Angirasa. And Krishna says, blood doesn't flow just by itself, sir. I am the one who is doing it. So we have to recognize this subtle force if we have to make sense of our life. And we have to recognize that our actions in life must be controlled by God's presence in us as the conscience. So the three levels in which God is present in us must be clearly understood. Otherwise, if simply saying God is in me, Swami is in me, doesn't muster much eyes in terms of real life. If I have to live my life properly as a Sevadal worker, as a devotee of God, etc., and follow this second path of service, love all, serve all, help ever, hurt never, and so on, I must understand this, because when I deal with another person, Mr. X or Y or whatever it is, I must realize that God is in that person also at 3 levels. The moment I realize all of you are God, I had better be humble. I can't insult you, I can't hurt you, I can't talk rudely to you, I can't do anything. I think we have to tell our Sevadals there. Prashanti, especially on the ladies' side. I'm sure I'll get applause. But those are practical realities. Swami himself has talked about it many times, even made jokes. Okay, all right. I told you life is a journey from little I to big I. I can complicate it and try to look like a Harvard Don, and let me try to do so with the next slide. Okay, here is the person trying to go from little I to big I through meditation or whatever it is. But then, the person is body, the person is at the gross level, life is there, and of course, God is in the heart. And the body and the mind and the senses are sort of barriers to go from here to here. They are some like barriers. These barriers are described in Vedanta in many ways. One of them is sheets, Annamaya Kosha, and so on and so forth. There are these koshas. So you will find 5 koshas here, and there is a chart here that gives you a mapping. These are technicalities. I won't bother you with this, but the point is, with going from little I to big I, you have to get rid of your egos. This ego business or body consciousness or dehabhimanam, as Swami used to say. Dehabhimanam is represented for pedagogical purposes in terms of koshas and many other ways. You have to pierce through it, call it by one name, call it by another name, but you have to go through that so-called sound barrier kind of thing. And that, Swami says, don't bother about all these things, serve people, do it with humility, see God in them, automatically all these things will crumble. I will give you other ways of describing these sheets that bind us. Those are technicalities, but they are helpful in certain lens, scholarly sense. But at the practical level, it all boils down to reading 1 meter, ego meter. I don't know where they sell it here, but I can give you a good ego meter. It won't cost you anything. It is just consulting your conscience. That's what Swami says. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now, the essence of what I am saying is the spiritual view of creation, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. This I call as view 1 of creation. You know, your Declaration of Independence starts with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, all of which have been granted to you by God. And then you try to be happy, as they do in this city, Hollywood, or in Las Vegas for that matter, which is not very far from here, I'm told. Luckily, it's not on my trip. Dr. Reddy has made sure I'm as far away from Las Vegas as possible. Lead us not into temptation. So the current worldly view of the same. You see, this is the spiritual view which I'm trying to talk about. You know, what does society mean in spiritual point of view? What does nature mean from a spiritual point of view? Whereas the worldly view of society is very different. Society exists so that I can make a fast buck. Society, many people think of it that way. Society is market. So all I have to do is to invent a way of taking your money and putting it in my pocket and leave you with penniless. But this view is bankrupt. And I'm going to talk about Swami's prescription for retuning this so that it matches this. In other words, life has to go on. People have to go to school, people have to teach, people have to be doctors, people have to be policemen, judges. Those things cannot be stopped. Swami is not asking you to stop any of this, including business. But our attitude to various activities can change, must change, should change. And if you retune it and realign it, your destination will become different. Instead of going this way, you will go this way. That's the whole point. That is what I'm going to talk about. All this is preamble. I don't know how much time I've taken in this, dealing with the preamble. But I'm not bothered. The time control is someone else's job. And let me go to the next slide, which tells you that my talk is just beginning. Okay, but it means it was also getting serious. Next slide, please. Okay, here we are, and we have come out of this abstract pure consciousness or Brahman, to which Mike Congleton referred. How did we pop out of that? This is a very simple schematic view I'm going to talk about now. I'll show a slightly more complicated view later on, just to show that I'm very educated, smart, and clever and stuff like that. I didn't go to Caltech, but I have gone to something the equivalent of Caltech in spirituality. That's my claim. But let's be serious. At the time of creation, the scriptures say Brahman willed and became two aspects which are embedded in this. Two aspects are consciousness and energy. Energy is usually referred to as Shakti, and consciousness is given various names, Shiva, Purusha, whatever it is. So Purusha and Prakriti is one way of describing these two, or Shiva and Shakti. Call them by any name. Operationally, this is consciousness, this is energy. Energy comes to us as subtle life force, prana. Because of prana, I am able to move my hands, I am able to move my mouth, tongue, speak, and so on. That comes from here. But this gives me awareness. I am aware you are there. I am aware I am sitting here. That comes from this. So we need this as well as this. And this is how it comes to us. Science is not able to say anything except how the atoms came into my body. That is very simple. Atoms come into my body because they go on eating food. I breathe, I drink. That's how atoms come into my body. Otherwise, they wouldn't come into my body. The atoms, of course, can't go on staying there. They have to go out, and there is a balance. And we don't realize that when a baby is born, it's only about 7 pounds or so. But after some years, by going regularly to MAC, they become 300 pounds. It's all atoms coming from cows and various other places. You can spare the cow and also yourself if you wish. Now, let me look at this a little more carefully, which I do in the next slide. The awareness that I talked about is of two kinds. One is external awareness or secondary consciousness. What do I mean by external awareness? I'm aware of what is outside my physical body. That is what external awareness means. You're all sitting there. I'm aware of that. Even animals are aware of that. Insects are aware of that. So this external awareness is related to the body and the senses. And it is present in all living beings, and God has given it with a purpose, mainly for self-protection and so on. You see storm clouds coming, you go and take shelter. You see a snake coming, you try to hide and protect yourself, and so on. You see a fire, you try to avoid it. So for survival and our protection, external awareness is necessary. It is not something to be scoffed at and regarded as dangerous. God has put it in for a purpose. And we must understand that purpose and not misuse it. But we also have something else, an inner awareness. That inner awareness is unique to human beings. Human beings alone are aware that they are something unique. Tiger and lion, they have external awareness because that is needed for their survival, drink, and also food and so on. Their entire mission in life is made up of 4 words, as Swami says, Khana, Pina, Sona, Marna. Khana means eat, Pina means drink, Sona means sleep, Marna means die. That's all. In between comes, propagating the species. That's all. They have no other purpose. Do we have a purpose? How do we know there's a purpose? I told you our purpose is to go back to God, where the little I must become big I, and so on and so forth. That comes because of this inner consciousness. And that inner consciousness is an ability that is given only to human beings, not to the tiger, not to the mosquito, or the snake. That is why Swami says human birth is a very rare thing. Jantu nam narajanmam durlabam. That is very important. So we are special. And we have to recognize that uniqueness and be in harmony with it. So some technicalities now. I said, consciousness, Shiva, Shakti or Purusha, Prakriti, and here we are. You may say, how did we pop out of that? And let me try to explain that with the next slide. This is slightly technical, but it is useful in a certain sense. There is Purusha, there is Prakriti. They are both needed in order to, what you call, create diversity in the universe. And in spirituality, it's rather interesting that at the individual level, Purusha is associated with male and Prakriti with the female. Because together, they generate more life and procreate and so on. So even at the abstract level, the same names were given. And when a person gets married, they raise a family. Because there is Purusha, there is Prakriti there. Purusha is supposed to take care of certain things. Prakriti or the female is supposed to take care of certain responsibilities. And all these are codified, and that is derived from this abstract principle. They have what you call various powers together in combination. Nada, Bindu, Kala, Mahat. I won't go into all technicalities, but this last one is the energy of creation. And these are important from a background point of view that will appear in the next slide, but this is what I want to concentrate on. And let me go to the next slide, which I hope you can see clearly. This is Mahat, and from it was born the 5 gross elements that we are normally talk about. The Greeks talked about it. Our ancients also talked about it. Earth, fire, water, sky, and so forth. How did these things come out of it? In the case of science, this is replaced by Big Bang, and we have a way of describing all this, which I shall talk about. But Vedanta said, no, there is something more to it. There is fine structure. There is something subtle about life. And Vedantic philosophy described creations purely with the human being in focus. Because Vedanta was interested in knowing how we have come from God and what is the return path to God. That's all they were interested in. That is why Vedanta is very sparse in details about evolution. How first, except very skeletally, first came fish and so on and so forth. That you see in the avatars. The first avatar is Matsya avatar, fish. Then Kurma, tortoise. And then you get animal, lion and so forth. All these things are reflected in the avatar, but in a very, very brief manner. Whereas science through Darwin and now molecular biology has laid out thing in pitiless detail. So it gives the inert aspect in great detail, but it misses out the subtle aspects, whereas Vedanta says, listen, first thing that to separate us, the mind and 5 subtle elements. The gross elements came from the subtle elements. Why are these subtle elements needed? Because they are needed because we have the organs of perception, eye, nose, ear. The eye can see. What is the meaning of seeing? It creates a sensation. That's a subtle sensation. Hear, that's a subtle sensation. Yes, I can talk about the physics. There are vibrations, currents, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of that, I get a sensation. The sensation I get when I listen to Beethoven is of one kind. The sensation I get when somebody fires me, my boss abuses me, that is different. There is a feeling associated with it. The feeling aspect is completely missed out in natural philosophy. There is a reason for it. Western philosophy, that is to say Greek philosophy, had the feeling part in it, but they took it out in the 16th century when science began to develop after the Renaissance. Vedanta was always conscious of the feeling aspect. So it is this subtle element entering the organs of perception makes them feel and have experience. The organs of action, they come from the gross elements, my arm, limbs, so on. But they also have subtle aspects because my conscience drives them. You know, I consciously lift this, or put it down, and so on and so forth. So the long and short of it is, Vedanta is bringing in the subtle elements. Krishna says, I am in you as Vaishvanara. You have to understand that like this. And the next slide, which is slightly technical, Swami has talked about this, but I want you to take a minute of, even if you don't understand this mapping, as we call it, to appreciate a fundamental point. Here are the 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Ether is a word that I use for sky or akasha. Those are the gross elements. And from the gross elements, we get the organs: the ear, the skin, the eye, the tongue, and the nose. We have all these organs. They are all made up of atoms. Huh? Ear is made up of atoms, eye is made up of atoms. But how come the ear is able to hear sounds, not the nose? How come the nose is able to smell and have a particular sensation? That is not explained by science, except in a vague way. At the end of the day, the exact feeling of smell is not explained by science. The chemistry of smell is explained, the physics of smell is explained, the neurology of smell is explained, the electrical signals are explained, but the sensation is beyond, because sensation is something subtle. So Vedanta has a thing called TANMATRAS, which shows how this and this connect in order to produce the sensations. That comes due to the presence of subtle elements as opposed to gross elements here. The Tanmatras is a very intelligent mapping. Sometimes it's one-to-many between the sensations and gross elements. You just, if you make a nose with your 3D, this thing, it won't have any smelling capacity. We find that. Here you have beautiful flowers. Bees will come to this. You make artificial flowers, you get it from China, it may look like this. Bees are smart, they won't come here. They have that cognition, you know. That Tanmatras is that subtle thing. So what I am trying to say is summarized in the next slide. Next slide, please. What does it all boil down to? Well, the first point is that the Vedantic view of creation is totally centered around the individual. Science is interested in explaining mountains, rivers, sky, all that. Vedanta says all that is irrelevant and unimportant for me. What is important is, here I am, I came from there, I must know how I came from there so that I can go back to where I came from. So the Vedantic view of creation is deliberately tailored to that, and we should not really compare it with science too much and say, oh, this is deficient and all that. It had a different purpose. And in the larger scheme of things, that is complementary to what science gives. Science gives a perspective, and we must blend it too, especially in this 21st century. Vedanta recognizes that humans live in a universe that is gross, and that the human body is made up of atoms. Vedanta understands that. It makes room for that. At the same time, Vedantic view of creation makes space for incorporating the subtle and causal aspects present in an individual. Causal aspect is important. Vedanta says you have a conscience, listen to it. Science never says you have a conscience and listen to it. It simply says these are the facts. Does any doctor tell you conscience, listen to your conscience? Maybe Dr. Reddy does, but I don't think the other doctors do outside. So this is very important. So we must have an integrated theory that that is what Vedanta is. It gives you a pathway for the trapped soul, the Jivatma, to find liberation. And by the way, all these aspects are incorporated in the Indian system of medicine, Ayurveda, because Ayurveda recognizes that you have a mind and the mind can influence your body, and they take into account all these things in their own way. The Ayurveda is actually about being healthy, and treating the sickness is only a very small part of it. Now, for a change, let me turn to the way we do things in the present time. Next slide, please. If you talk about the behavior of a person today, talk to any psychologist or anybody, they will discuss behavior purely in terms of external factors. So here is the individual, and his externality is summarized here via pictures. I mean, he's interested in sport, he's interested in vacation. he is interested in, shopping here, or is it gambling here, sorry. And all sorts of things, partying and so on and so forth. He's also concerned about his health. He's concerned about his work. He's concerned about wealth. All these are externalities, and the behavior of a person is judged only in terms of this. However, Vedanta says you must take an integrated view. Next slide, please. The integrated view is like this. The human being is made up of the gross body, and subtlety is represented here by the mind. Gross body includes the senses, which are controlled by the mind, and the heart. The body, senses, mind are influenced by the external world. So when I go to the shopping mall, it is this which is in action. The mind, by the way, carries the imprint of previous births because it is subtle. It doesn't die when the body dies. It goes from one janma to another janma. The mind carries that. Modern science doesn't allow for that, whereas Vedanta allows for that. That's how you get karma and stuff like that. So we have to keep that in mind when we plan the return journey. And God, who is ever, is there as the eternal witness, Sakshi Bhutam. And if you want, He will give you the GPS guidance. So a complete analysis of human being requires a consideration of not only external factors, but also the vasanas that come to us from previous births and the spiritual orientation of the person. So what are the take-home lessons from this? The next slide gives you an idea. The first take-home lesson is the human being is much more than a mere social animal. This is an important point because modern sociologists do not take into account many of the factors that I'm talking about, including awareness, self-awareness, consciousness, and so on. And secondly, when we talk of behavior, we have to take into account both individual and collective behavior. And they must be understood in a larger framework. Only then I can make a connection between Vyashti and Samashti. In the case of the modern social sciences, they understand the connection, but they don't mandate as much as they should. Whereas here, God is present at the macro level, God is present at the micro level, so the God provides the link, and better we follow that link as God has led it. I'll explain that a little later. And I stress this because the problems of today cannot be understood by studying the weaknesses of the mind alone. Because the mind is the one entity that creates most of the problems in the world. Dr. Reddy referred to greed. Greed is born in the mind. And it is greed that leads to economic inequity. It is greed that leads to political unfairness. It is greed that leads to what you call all the problems that you see in terms of corruption, gender oppression, and so on and so forth. Take, for example, female infanticide in India, which has become rampant after the advent of ultrasound scanning. In Punjab and Haryana especially, parents destroy the female child. It has become very bad, gender, this thing. Though there are laws, people, violate the laws. There are fellows who set up ultrascan shops because they want to make money. Greed. They don't care that if they are culpable, they are what you call fellows who aid in homicide, because that's what it is. That is greed. Can we tolerate that? When we lead a life where we keep out values, where we talk about social values at a very cosmetic level, then you are going to have these problems. It is only when you bring the spiritual values that you have a moral, what you call, pillar to lean on and hold on to, that then you will stop being mean, cruel, and so on. So, if you want to solve the problems of today, you should not apply the mind. Mind is the source of problems. It cannot solve the problems it creates. You have to go to a different plane, and that I shall talk about later. In fact, I said here, in brief, the solutions are to be found in the moral plane at the level of the heart. That applies very much to the India of today, where we have two major problems. One is corruption, And the second is, according to the newspapers, these are two problems, but we have 10 others. Swami used to say everybody is an MBA, meaning you have a mind, you have a body, and an Atma. He'll say you're MBA. He used to say in the 90s very often. All right, how do you place them? What is the hierarchy? You can have three possibilities only. You can put the body, mind, and Atma in this order, where Atma comes at the bottom. You can put the mind, body, and Atma in this manner, or Atma, mind, and body. Which of these options is ideal? Swami has given the answer. Do all these possibilities occur in nature? Yes, they do. And to understand that, let us go to Vedanta and what it says. Next slide, please. Okay, here you are the body, mind, and Atma. There are people like that. They are supposed to be dominated by tamoguna, they are called tamasic, and they are just like animals. Because they are interested in indulging the senses. Basically, they are indulging the senses via alcohol and so many other things. What about this, which are colored in blue? Such people are rajasic. Such people are dominated by the mind. They can be very clever, very intelligent, very smart. But they can be very selfish, very cruel, and in the worst case, absolutely demonic. Now, Adolf Hitler was not an idiot. He was a very clever fellow in the sense he brought up Germany from the depths of depression to a very strong economic state that, calls for a lot of leadership and all that. And he was a vegetarian. He lived a very Spartan life. But he had one very serious aberration which made him literally a devil. You can have people who may not be called Hitlers, but they are also devilish. They may cheat like anything and make a lot of money. And in the process, a lot of lives may be destroyed. All the economic scams that we hear about, those are also devilish people. They are very clever people. You have other examples of devilishness where they do things according to law, so-called, but at the end of the day, it is not really moral. I'll talk about it later on. So devilishness comes in various ways, and it all comes because Atma is put at the bottom. Swami says that's wrong. This is the order, correct order. Atma first, mind and body. Such a person is saint. Okay. If you get this ordering right in yourself, are you through? Have you reached the home? Not yet. But before I go to that, I want to give you some ideas about gunas, because this is not often talked about, and I would like you to understand it, because it's very important. Next slide, please. Now, the simplest way of understanding gunas is to compare it with color television. You may not be aware of it, but color television is based on basically three colors. These are the primary colors: blue, green, and red. And all the colors that you get in your screen are simply the result of these three colors being mixed in various ways. I have given that an analytic representation in terms of three basis vectors being and all that, and Venkat is smiling because he understands exactly what I'm trying to say. I won't try to show off that much, but let me say that if I mix this, I can get all these colors and many more, millions more. So what has this got to do with gunas? What has got color television to do with gunas? I think it is in the next slide. Indeed it is. The basic gunas are tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic. Point is, we are not all in one category or the other. We have a mixture of all three. Only thing is, one quality will be dominating and other qualities will be minor. Now the question arises, is my tamasic level, if I'm a tamasic person, is it constant? If I'm a rajasic person, is it constant? If I'm a sattvic person, is it constant? And the answer is given in the next slide. Okay. Take a sattvic person. His level, if this is 0, his level is generally there. But once in a while, even a sattvic person can get pretty nasty and mean, that takes a dip. It's like the Dow Jones suddenly falling due to heavy trading and sell-off. On the other hand, you take an extremely cruel and mean guy, he may do a very nice thing. There may be an elderly lady, he may help that person to cross the road, and momentarily, his behavior will increase. The point I am trying to say is, just like our blood sugar and blood pressure and all that, gunas also vary. And what we have to do is, first thing we have to stabilize it. That's what doctors do, you stabilize it. And then, if you are here, try to get here. If you are here, try to get here. And if you are there, what do you do? That's a different story. I'll come to that in a minute. But you have to keep going up. The the Dow Jones should not come down. Gene Massey is shaking his head. Okay. What does Swami say on gunas? Now you may say, shut up. Now tell us what Swami says. And we want to know whether what you're saying is right. Okay, next slide, please. Swami says this thing. If you are a lazy person, first stop being lazy and be active. That means fight tamoguna with rajoguna. Because rajoguna is connected with activity. Hyperactivity is devilish. Don't do that. They improve the quality of rajas to become elevated to the level of sattva. So from tamo, you go to rajo, that's progress. Rajo to sattva. You are doing fine. You are in the A. But are you A++? No. You are still A. Now if you want the rating to go to A++, then you have to do something. What is that something? Now there, Swami says something very, very important. Don't be just a saint, because even then you are bound. You have to understand this binding business. What is binding? Is it bound with glue, Fevicol? What is it? Binding is attachment. We are all attached. Some people have a sort of a liking for pens. I have a liking for pens. Not that I collect, but when I see a nice pen, I like it. Don't give me pens. I've got enough of them. Because people say, oh, we have to give this guy a gift. Please don't. We have all kinds of attachments. Some people have attachment to cars. They collect all sorts of old cars, even though they don't have garages. I don't know what they get out of it, but they get some fun. Attachment. Avoid attachment. But what about the sattvic man? Even he has attachments. We don't realize that. He's a good person, he gives charity, he's always nice, welcomes, very hospitable and all that. What are his attachments? He says, after I die, I want to go to heaven. I want to see my daughter married in a good family. I want my son to have a good job. He must go to America, get a green card, not be an illegal immigrant. But that is for an Indian I'm talking about. So we have our dreams. Swami says all that binds you. Those dreams are associated with your body and mind. You are not the body, you are not the mind. You are me. That calls for higher this thing. So you have to break all those chains. Swami says, Samoguna can be compared to a rusty old iron chain. It binds you. Rajoguna is like a silver chain. Silver is more expensive than rusty iron, but still Sattva-guna is a rope chain, a golden chain. You may say gold, but at the end of the day, chain is a chain, it binds you. You must get out of it. So, next slide, please. I showed you the journey from eye to eye. And I said you have to go through all these things. These are the things that bind you. So you have to get rid of the binding. And how do you get rid of the binding? How do you improve the quality of your, what you call gunas? It is essentially through refinement. That is where sadhana comes. The word sadhana simply means a process that leads to purification. Now, that is left at that. What are the processes available to you for purification? There are many. You have to choose one that is suitable to you in your circumstances. But if you purify yourself, like gold is purified, its value appreciates. If you purify yourself from the contamination that arises due to binding, then you can go from here. And what is the level that you have to go? What is the threshold that you have to cross in order to really go from this world. This is like a sound barrier. What is that sound barrier? That Swami has described. But we'll come to that in a minute. Next slide, please. This is a very beautiful picture. Unfortunately, due to the ambient light, you can't see it. This shows a goldsmith. And Swami has often said that, I am like a goldsmith. I put you through fire, I beat you, and that, in the end of it, I purify and make an ornament out of you. So sadhana is a process of purification, and it will involve ups and downs. And Swami will take us through some difficulties, but we must understand Swami is actually helping us and refining us. That is the way we have to treat it. Next slide, please. And all that allows us to go from this spiritual lower self to the real self. Okay? This doesn't happen in one birth. This happens in many births. But people are not conscious of it. What Swami says is, listen, don't worry about many births. You are in this birth. I have come to you. I have told you, take the express fast flight, non-stop. Okay? Take that and go. Don't go by the slow trains. Take the fast flight. Executive class and fly right away. I will tell you how to do that. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. I told you it happens through many lives. Let us explore that for a minute because that's important. I told you the mind contains the imprint of the previous birth. This is how it happens. Let's say this is a person, and this person has this body. Soul is shown as dark. That is to say, God is there, but the person is tamasic, the mind. The person dies. The body is consigned to the, returned to the elements in one form or the other. The soul cannot die. It's eternal. What about the mind? Mind is subtle. When you bury it or burn it, mind doesn't burn off. They two join together and become what is called a subtle body. This subtle body wanders and then enters a womb because, it has got the power of life. At some point, the baby in the womb gets life. Swami says it happens in the 12th week. Is that right? You said 12th week, isn't it? 12th week. Till that time, it is not an independent body. It's just a growth in the mother's womb. But the 12th life, it becomes an independent, conscious entity and it has got its own life. And that has happened because of the wandering, subtle body. Now, how does it match? Who does the matchmaking? That's very beautiful. That's done by the law of karma. So, law of karma makes sure that the right subtle thing goes to some. If two people have to get hell, they will get a devilish child. That devilish child has been born. So, we have to be very careful about all these things. Okay, these are the things, this person will carry the imprint of the tendencies, gunas acquired in the previous life. But if you refine the gunas in this life by being good, it is like, going through the goldsmith. Through many lives, you will improve and come to a good stage. And Arjuna asked Krishna, what happens at that end? Okay, you go through many lives, you improve, you refine. What happens? Krishna says, then in the last stage, the soul will be born in two different ways. It may be born in very extreme poor conditions, or it may be born in slightly more affluent conditions. Both are tests. And you see this very beautifully in the case, at least that's the way I see it, in Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Vivekananda. Ramakrishna was born in an utterly poor family. He was ready for the last hop, and he did make it. Vivekananda was born in a middle-class family, and he was torn. Do I go and serve my family? Do I earn a degree? Do I get a job, work for the government, and take care of my family? Or do I leapfrog and go to the master? He was caught in that tussle. And destiny took him very kindly to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He said, Kali will take care of your family. You just follow me. So Krishna gives the hint. He will put you in that situation. And if you have the grace of God, He will take you out like He did for Vivekananda. So this is very important. We should not waste this birth. This is a birth where we can either speed up or slow down. The choice is with us. Do I want to accelerate? No ticket, huh? You can do it freely. It all boils down to what you may call the Vedic commandments. Just as Moses had commands, the Vedic society had commands. It says, make sure every action is dharmic. It's the foundation. Based on dharma, you're allowed to make money, you're allowed to have desires, but within this scope of dharma. But make sure that your desire for money and various other things, property, etc., family and all that, has a ceiling. So there are two boundaries. This is one bound, lower bound, and this is the upper bound, as they say in mathematics. And this is the code that applied to all Purusharthas. Purusharthas apply to pauper, to king, president, everybody. Now, I am seeing very hungry faces here, so I'll skip the next slide. Next slide, you skip that. I'll come now to the next slide. Next slide, please. This is about duty. I talk about duty because the central aspect of the Bhagavad Gita is duty. Sometimes the word dharma is used to refer to duty. So what kind of duty are we talking about? I may probably talk about it later in detail. But for now I say, whenever we talk of duty, the first thing is, it must be done sincerely. There are different kinds. I can do my duty very sincerely, but I may have expectations. I may work very hard for my boss, but I will be expecting a raise. But I can also do one thing. I perform my duty sincerely without any expectations, and I offer it to God as an act of selfless love. You say, are there fools like that? There used to be, and there still are. In the medical profession, you see a lot of it. There are doctors who work very hard, and all they want is their patient to be cured, be happy, and discharged. They are not bothered about the money. Of course, they have to make a living. If they can charge the patient, they charge the patient, not exorbitantly. But if the patient cannot pay, they say, it doesn't matter. My job is to save lives. There are people like that in this world today, in all countries, including this country. The second option is what God prefers. God always says that, do your duty. Swami used to say, do your duty. He didn't add the fine print, do your duty without expectations and offering it for me. In other words, for us who knew Swami, who know Swami, who believe in Swami, the simplest thing is to say, whatever I do, I'm really doing it for Swami. A mother may cook food for the children, but she will say, the children who eat are only Swami. I see God in them and I am feeding them. The cook will say, my boss eats it, but my boss is Krishna in disguise. Then the whole attitude changes. You work for a company. You are not bothered about the salary they give. They give you, it's all right. They give it to me, I need it. I don't give importance to it. My importance is given to doing a good job and making my boss happy. Even though this may look like a bit of advertisement, that is what I always tell our boys. We have to do good programs so that people come and tell us, I liked your programs. When they say that, it means Swami is telling us. So don't think I'm asking you to come and tell us in Radio Sai, oh, your programs are fantastic. I also tell them, you know, they listen to a radio. We don't know when they switch off. If I'm giving a talk in a hall and my talk is lousy, people will all be headed for the exit door, even though there is no fire. Whereas in the case of radio, we have no idea, and we don't have Nielsen ratings and things like that. The only way we can make sure the people listen to us is give them something which they would really like. So we have to put our heart and soul into everything that we do. And I hope we are trying to do that, at least. Okay. Swami has said, make work into worship. When does that happen? Next slide, please. That was actually described by Krishna himself in the sloka 3.11. He says, using the body, the mind, and the senses, the karma yogi constantly performs actions in a dispassionate manner as an act of self-purification. In other words, I talked about purification. I do work in order to purify myself. I don't even have to go and do seva. Seva is possible only sometimes, once a week. What about the rest of the time? Whatever I do as an act of self-purification, and I offer it to God. How do I offer it to God? One word. Swami has given a beautiful discourse on that. Krishnarpanam. Oh Krishna, I offer it to you. And of course, there are people who have asked questions. Hislop asked Swami a question. Swami, I shave every day. How do I offer it to you? It looks ridiculous. Swami asked, Hislop, why do you shave? Why shave? Swami, you have to look presentable and decent. That's why I shave every day. That's right. So you say, I shave in order that I give I look pleasant and give a pleasing appearance to all the people. All the people means who? The God in those people. So think of you are dressing nicely or something, not to show off that you have got Cartier jewels or whatever it is, but as a way of, making people feel good. That's why Swami always insisted, you must dress well, and he would give very good saris and all that. He never did that kind of safari stores. Saris were always 10 times more expensive. I wish men wore saris, we would have also got. Okay, so I talked about Purusharthas. And it's not easy to go and tell a farmer what the Purusharthas is. Dharma, Artha, Moksha. What are you talking? I don't understand. So the Vedantic society, this is very important. I was talking about individual and society. How do you diffuse values into society? This is a question that we are faced with today. In Vedantic society, next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. How do you diffuse values into society? You can't talk to them about Bhagavad Gita, Karma Yoga and all that. Well, the point is, the ancients understood society had people of different caliber and so on and so forth. It is built into, diversity is built into society. They have different aptitudes. And Krishna describes them in terms of varnas. I won't go into all of that. But the bottom line is, people have intrinsic aptitudes, and that is true of society even today. What do I mean by intrinsic aptitudes? If you go and ask some kids in the school, what do you want to be? Some people will say, I want to be a writer. Some kid will say, I want to be an astronaut. Some kid will say, I want to, become a scientist. And so I want to be a musician, and so on. So, keeping this in mind, they designed a certain social code in the Vedic society as follows. Next slide, please. Okay. In Vedic times, literacy was very poor. Only the Brahmins understood, the kings understood, were literate to a certain extent. Lower strata were not. So you can't ask them to read scriptures, read the Bible, like Vedas or Upanishads. They just can't do. So what they did was, they had a lot of folklore stories about values. And these stories were made available to people through drama, through music, and plays, and so on and so forth. So folklore and the medium of art and music and culture was used to, and also festivals. In festivals, you have different festivals of different type. In one festival you fast, Sivaratri you fast. Another festival you eat a lot. Another festival you make idols of clay and then immerse them. And all these were different ways of, inculcating awareness of nature and so on. For example, yesterday I spoke at Caltech. I talked about Nagapanchami, where women worship cobras. Wow, what the hell do you do and worship cobras? It looks ridiculous. No, cobra was seen as a part of nature, and worshipping cobra means worshipping nature. In the same way, people used to worship mountains, they worship trees, they worship rivers, all these things. This was by way of inculcating a love for nature and respecting nature, adoring nature, and not spoiling it. But when we fail to understand the meaning, aberrations can come, and that is very serious. And I will talk about it later. Next slide, please. This is a very important slide because what you see in this slide is the message of the Gita paraphrased by Swami in one single piece like this. This is the essence of the Gita, and it occurs in the Gita Vahini. And if you have got this, you don't have to listen to the rest of my talks, but please do come because I can't talk to an empty hall. And you will be upsetting all the people who made the nice arrangements. Okay, what is the essence of the Gita? Life is a series of actions. All sorts of, we drive, that is an action. We eat, that is an action. So life, from morning to evening, life is a series of actions. All these actions are performed in the world that we live in. We can't argue with it. And there's no point in arguing with it. It's meaningless. And all these actions that we perform are related to circumstances associated with the world. Let me give you a trivial example. You go to office. When you go to office, you have to dress. I don't know how they do it these days, but in the old days, people used to wear suits and go to office. It is needed. So that's also an action. So in short, all actions are associated with circumstances in the world. War is one such. War is an action which is created by circumstances in the world. There may be something happening which leads to tension, somebody doing something wrong, and then war breaks out. That is how the Mahabharata war broke out. But Swami says, this is what Krishna says, the motivation for all action should not be based entirely on circumstances in the world. The motivation for the action must be based in something primordial. It must come from your Atman. That means your action must carry the flavor of Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa. Whatever it is, whether you sing or dance or write, cook, it must have that flavor, some aspect of that flavor. The motivation for that action. This is extremely important because the moment you put this constraint, certain kinds of actions are automatically ruled out. Hate and an expression of hate or anger is not allowed. It is illegal, not possible. But what do you get out of this? My alignment towards God improves, and my journey through from I to I, little I to big I, is facilitated. So all I have to do is, whatever I do in life, all the actions, make sure they are aligned to Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa. Now, here in the bhajan hall, you have this harmonium. The simplest way of playing that is just blow air through it. And sat, reads right. Then you get what is called the Shruti. All the singers must be aligned to the Shruti. Otherwise, the music is horrible. It is called apashruti, out of key. In India, musicians normally use the tambura for classical music, both in the North Indian style and South Indian style. The song may be anything, but it must have alignment to the Shruti. The notes must be in harmony with that. Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa are the notes, Shruti notes of life. And they are primordial. They come from God because God is truth, God is Dharma, God is compassion. God is love, God is peace. Peace is not an abstract entity. Peace is God. Swami is God. He says, there is no selfishness in me from top to toe. He has said it thousands of times. No swartam, no saprayojan. Swartam is selfishness, saprayojan is self-interest. There is absolutely nothing. That is why all his actions were dharmic and his love was totally pure. His love is prema. You and I don't have prema. We have contaminated stuff. More we purify it, the more it comes close to prema. Prema is selfless love. And selfless love implies sacrifice. What am I sacrificing? Nothing. He says you don't have to sacrifice your wife, family, bank account. Sacrifice your ego. And what is the ultimate kind of this thing? That is like what you have, Janaka, who didn't have any body consciousness. Is that a signal that I should stop? So, what happens to now? Do I care to leave you in suspense? Then I'll be in suspense. I think I've given such a heavy dose afternoon. I may have, maybe there'll be heavy leakage. So somebody shut all the doors, please. Okay. I have only 2 slides. And if you allow me, we will do it gracefully. Okay? All right. Next slide, please. This is very important because I talked about being bound by the gunas, even the sattva is the gold chain. So what do? Krishna says and Swami says the thing, break that golden rope and go beyond the gunas. And in spirituality, there are 2 kinds of texts. One is the Vedas and the other is the Upanishads. The Vedas keep you at the level of the gunas, at best they bring you to the sattva level. But God says you must go beyond that. So you must go to the end of the Vedas, which is the Vedanta. And Krishna himself says this in the 2nd chapter in 4 slokas. You know the Bhagavad Gita by heart, and I'm sure you can, all the slokas will come to you in Sanskrit. Krishna says, the ignorant, O Partha, reveling in the letter of the Vedas, declare there is naught else. Arjuna, the Vedas deal with the evolutes of the gunas or the modes of Prakriti. So if you are staying at the level of Vedas, you are staying at the level of gunas. You have to go beyond the gunas. Gunatita you have to become. Transcend through the 3 gunas and free thyself from pairs of opposites, remaining ever balanced and centered in the self. To an enlightened Brahmin, the Vedas are as useful as a well is when there is a flood of water everywhere. And again, in the Bhagavad Gita, next slide please, Krishna says, many and various are the sacrifices enunciated by the Vedas. Know them all to spring from actions, the senses and the body. Once thou knowest this, thou canst win release. Superior to the sacrifice of material objects is sacrifice based on knowledge. You see, when we have a fire and we offer, that is material objects being offered to fire. What Krishna says is, you sacrifice your ignorance and ego in the fire of knowledge. Then you become purified. And verily, there is no greater principle than knowledge. And before I stop, and he shows me politely the way out on the stairs, there is one thing I must draw attention to. Well, this is very important. At the beginning of the Gita, Krishna scolds Arjuna for being a coward and not fighting. And then all of a sudden he says, do you know who you are? You are the Atma. And nobody pauses to ask the question, why on earth is Krishna talking about the Atma suddenly? I mean, here is the guy, the war to be fought, and this guy says, I won't fight. And Krishna says, you are the Atma. What has the Atma got to do with war? Like in the famous story where a fisherman asked the professor from London School of Economics, but professor, what has that got to do with the price of fish? I mean, he was trying to tell him LSE's latest theory. Atma is the starting point of everything, including actions. And Arjuna was involved in an action called fighting war. So he's trying to take him to the very roots, and the entire Bhagavad Gita is a relationship between the cosmic, the transcendental principle and actions that we perform with our mind, senses and body. And how to tune it properly so that you make the return journey. So the Atma has to be brought in, right? And he brings it in very abruptly and then takes it from there step by step. So at the end of the day, if we think the Vedas are the end all and be all, we are mistaken, because Krishna says, it's a good first step, but how long will you stay in kindergarten? You have to go to school, you go from high school to college, and then you have to enter a prestigious university like Harvard, Princeton, Yale. I'm not campaigning for them. But in spirituality, it means it going from the gunas to above the gunas and to Vedanta. Vedanta means the end of Vedas. And Bhagavad Gita is the essence of Vedanta. And Swami gave the Bhagavad Gita, one Bhagavad Gita and 2,000 discourses. So he just made it very, very easy. It is for lower than dummies. If there is a thing lower than dummies, don't say that's you. But the Swami's message gives that. So let us break here at this point, otherwise I'll break his heart, which I don't want to. And he will break my bones, which can be painful. And sir, let me get down with grace.